My name is Leticia Hughes. I'm a Director of Global Marketing here at Ekahau. If you've joined a previous session in our webinar series, it's time for better Wi-Fi. Thank you and welcome back. If this is your first time joining, we hope you find this webinar informative and insightful, and we look forward to having you join future sessions. Before we get started, here are some quick housekeeping items. You are in listen-only mode, so your lines are muted. In order to submit a question, type your inquiry into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send your questions at any time during the presentation, and our subject matter experts will address them during the Q&A session at the end. And today we have on the call our Technical Solutions Architect, Jerry Alla. He's joined to help us field any of your questions today. So today's webinar topic is using Ekahau Sidekick, makes physical wireless LAN surveys much easier. Bryan Harkins is our Training and Enablement Manager here at Ekahau. He joins us again to discuss this important topic. So let's get started, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Bryan.
Thank you, Leticia. For those of you that have done physical site surveys and wireless troubleshooting before, you know that part of the trouble is having all the right adapters and all the right dongles and cables and other connectors to go out and gather data in as quick a manner as possible to make the troubleshooting faster, or you want to save time on the survey, so you've got a lot of things going on at once. The Ekahau Sidekick just makes that so much easier because it's a single device. We're going to look at what is the Ekahau Sidekick and how it makes these things easier for you as we go through the presentation. First, we're going to have an introduction to the Ekahau Sidekick. Then we're going to look at how to use it, how it makes surveys easier. We'll talk about some next steps for you to take after today's webinar. And then we'll open up for some questions and answers where Jerry Ola and I will try to answer as many of your questions as we can, but don't hold off until then, though. In the meantime, just be filling in those questions in the sidebar like Leticia had mentioned earlier. First, the Ekahau Sidekick. This is an industry-first, purpose-built, wearable Wi-Fi survey device. This is going to change how people conduct physical surveys, and it's going to change how you do wireless troubleshooting as well, because it just makes life so much easier to have a wearable instead of having everything hanging off of your laptop or your tablet. Look at the gentleman on the right here in this picture. He's wearing it kind of like a messenger bag, off to the side. I've seen people wear them with camera holsters and other things to wear them in different locations, but it's very simple to wear that, and you really don't notice it that much once you are wearing it and walking about. But the big thing you are going to notice is that you don't have all those things hanging off of your tablet or off of your laptop. And if you're walking down a busy corridor trying to do a survey during a peak business time like you should to gather as much information about what happens on a normal day as possible in the area, you don't look like something from Mars, and you don't have the opportunity for people to bump into you as much and knock you about. No one else in the business does this. There's no other device like this in the world for this purpose. It is a purpose-built thing just for surveys and troubleshooting for wireless networks. It allows you to have faster and more precise Wi-Fi site surveys. It's more efficient troubleshooting of wireless networks and more comprehensive analysis. We're going to touch on all those as we go through as to how the Ekahau Sidekick enables you to do that. It has built-in spectrum analysis for lightning-fast, ultra-high resolution visualizations of what's happening in your airspace. It's a single spectrum analysis radio. However, it's over 20 times faster than using the dongle spectrum analyzers. So you're able to scan both bands with a single radio instead of having to have two radios. And not only are you saving having to have two radios, it's also faster than using the two radios together would be. So it's a much more efficient method of gathering the information at layer one, things like X10 cameras, microwaves, weather radar, all the known offenders in the same space that we use Wi-Fi. You're going to find those a lot faster with the spectrum analysis from the Ekahau Sidekick. And the visualizations are going to be much smoother and more timely than using other spectrum analysis devices in Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi signal and noise measurement is accomplished by using two enterprise-grade internal radios. They're 802.11 AC capable. These are not the consumer-grade dongle type things that you may have used with other products in the past. They're not even the same as taking one of those and tweaking them to be more sensitive. These are true enterprise access point quality radios that are going to give you a better hearing range because they're going to have a better receive sensitivity, and they're going to have a larger cell size because of that. So you're going to be able to hear more of the things around you, and being able to hear more of the things around you, you're able to gather more information to make a more intelligent predictive design from your site survey work, and you're able to find things faster that could be causing you problems on your network, greatly reducing your troubleshooting times. It also has, and this is another game changer. You know, you can put radios in a box, but you still got to power them. This is a game changer for wireless surveys and troubleshooting because it has an internal battery that's rechargeable. It's going to give you longer survey time. Rather than running down your laptop battery or your tablet battery from powering external dongles and having to go switch out laptops and start a survey over, or stop the survey and switch out your batteries to keep going, this is going to work for an entire day's survey work on its own rechargeable internal battery without draining down your tablet, without draining down your laptop. So that's going to allow you to stay in the field longer, get more work done, and it's going to allow you to solve problems faster just because you don't have to worry about how am I going to power my adapters off of my little tablet or my short life laptop battery. How to use the Ekahau Sidekick? It's very simple. First, power on the Sidekick. There's a convenient button placed on the top of the device. Connect your laptop or your tablet to Sidekick using the single USB cable to a laptop or tablet that's already running Ekahau Site Survey. And then you just wait for the radios to start reporting data back in, which just takes a few seconds for that to start reporting back in and displaying in your UI. And once you have the device powered, connected, and reporting back to your laptop or tablet, you simply begin your survey or troubleshooting work by walking into the space where you want to begin doing the work. Very simple. How it makes the work easier for you: faster spectrum analysis. We mentioned earlier the much faster radio. It sweeps the frequencies faster. Even though it's a single radio scanning both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz spectrums, it's sweeping them much, much faster than the external dongles will. And it's a more sensitive radio. So not only is it able to sweep the spectrums faster, it's able to do so more efficiently because it's going to hear more. It's going to hear more things at distance. It's going to hear fainter signals that the client might actually have to be closer to be experiencing some type of problem from it. And you may not be standing exactly where they experienced the problem, but you're going to be able to hear it better with this radio. And it's going to greatly reduce the amount of time that you need to stand in a single spot to find those noise sources because of how fast it sweeps. And again, it's over 20 times faster than the traditional external spectrum analysis dongles would do. The two high-performance Wi-Fi adapters are able to detect ABGN and AC networks. You can configure the channel scanning patterns, and it supports all the regulatory domains. So this can be used, anywhere in the world because it's a passive device. You're not going to be using the Ekahau Sidekick in any active mode, so it's never going to transmit. It's just listening. The amplitude range, or the sensitivity range for it, is going to be between -20 and -95 dBm. So you're going to hear signals that are right at the noise floor. You're going to be able to determine, if something at that distance is causing a problem or not, because you're able to get down to that noise floor and hear those things. And it has integrated antennas. That's another important thing. The antenna array that's inside the Ekahau Sidekick is aligned such that it's going to be able to hear better. And since it is an internal array for the antenna, you're not going to bump them against something and change the polarity. You're not going to have to worry about them breaking as you walk about, or not having them with you, dropping them out of your kit, and not having a radio with an antenna on it to use for the survey. It's all right there in the one box. And this is big, wearable device. So no dongles, reduced weight in your hands. One of the most difficult things I've always found in doing the site surveys is, you know, your arms and your back get tired from carrying stuff all the time. And you can get the harnesses with the little table on it to mount your laptop or your tablet on, and that relieves some of the stress from your hand, but your back and neck are always sore from, you know, walking around all day doing these surveys, and you find yourself having to take breaks very frequently. But with the wearable device, and it's very light, you're not going to have any issues like we used to have with arm fatigue from having to carry so much stuff around. Again, we mentioned the internal battery. It's rechargeable. It's not going to drain the battery of your laptop or your tablet. More time in the field because you're not always having to go back and charge, and you're always able to be working more because of having the power that's right there in the device. Now, I have had people ask me, why don't you also have, you know, an internal fan cooling it? It's not really needed because it has a heat sink on the front, and as you're walking about, the wind created from your movement rushes across the heat sink and cools it. Plus, a fan would be draining the battery and shorten the useful life, and it's a moving part. So you don't want to have that in something that is designed to be working for a long time like this. So it's just really going to be a much more efficient device because of the way it's been configured. I'm going to turn over now to our Jerry Ola, who's a certified wireless network expert. He's going to give us a demonstration and show us how great this view is from the spectrum analysis that's coming in, how smooth it is, how clean it looks when you're working on it. I'm going to turn it over to Jerry now and let you take over, sir.
All right, thanks, Brian. Yeah, so I wanted to show some live demonstration here of the Ekahau Sidekick. So I'm going to go ahead and actually just kind of go through the process that Brian was explaining there of actually just connecting the Sidekick here and powering it on so that you can see it live of, you know, kind of getting started, and then we'll analyze some live spectrum data and some live Wi-Fi data that it's picking up around me, showing how you could use this as a troubleshooting tool as well as obviously for surveying that as well as capturing that data. So I'm going to go ahead and power up the Sidekick device here, and once it powers up, we should get a notification in the Ekahau Sites application here. This is actually running a development build of the 9.1 release, so kind of a nice early sneak preview for you guys here. You'll see a few differences when it comes to the real-time frequency monitor, some changes there to support the Sidekick, and just you know, provide some rich views with that enhanced data that we're getting off of the Sidekick. All right, so here we go. We can start to see some of the data coming in from the Sidekick here, and if I pull up my view from the bottom of the screen here, we can see some of that live data starting to come in here as it's updating here and refreshing. And then if we go and switch between different modes, we can actually look at a couple of different views here. So I'm going to go ahead and looks like it's actually still updating. Let me actually relaunch this development build. I had this running here in the background for a while, and I'm wondering if it needs to be refreshed here. So 1 second. And while that's coming up there, Brian, if you want to throw the URLs here for the Ekahau Sidekick, we've got a couple demo videos here that you can look at as well.
Okay, will do, sir. I'll put those in the chat in just a moment.
Yeah, that'd be great. So while that's starting back up here, we'll see the adapters when they get connected, and you'll see just like the traditional setup with the adapters where you have your USB hub and the adapters, each of those will be configurable and accessible within the Ekahau Site Survey application. And I've got a couple signal generating devices here that will also fire up to take a look at the same time. So Brian's got those links pasted in the chat box there. If you want to pull those up, you can take a look at some of those. And let's see if we can start to see some of the data here coming in. And the nice thing is, like Bryan was explaining, is it's analyzing both the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz bands simultaneously. So yeah, here we go. We can see now some of the activity that it's seeing. We're analyzing both the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz bands. So right now you can see I'm on the 5 gigahertz tab here. But simultaneously we can, we're collecting data and taking those measurements on 2.4. So if you think of it from a survey standpoint, you're recording all of that information simultaneously, so you can analyze this data post-survey as well as live for troubleshooting. So yeah, let's see what happens when we introduce some things into the spectrum here. So kind of going through some of the new capabilities in the real-time frequency monitor. I'm going to switch this over to the waterfall view here in the lower pane so we get a more rich view there. And what I'm going to do is start by just generating a signal here in the 2.4 range, and we should be able to see that show up pretty quickly. Hopefully that comes through the GoToWebinar here. But yeah, I can see that popping up here in the waterfall view in the bottom. You can see what that looks like from an RF standpoint, that RF energy. And then what we can do is actually drill down into that to get a better understanding of what type of energy that is, what type of signal. You can see it's this narrow band frequency hopping. So I want to show you how rapidly the spectrum analyzer is updating to provide some really rich information that we can use for troubleshooting purposes. Now we can look at this from a couple of different views in this 9.1 kind of early preview build here. So if I go to this point density view, you can see this could also be really helpful to more isolate different radios if you're in a very noisy environment. I like to use this point density view to get a better visual of the RF energy that's being measured and detected. Especially, you can see there's obviously multiple radios that are being detected and transmitting here. We have that narrow band jammer over here that I can zoom back in on. Now we're in this point density view, and you can see how rapidly it's updated. And keep in mind, we're looking at the entire 2.4 range here, while simultaneously, like we're saying, there's stuff going on here in the 5 gigahertz. So let's generate some different things just to see what this would look like. So I'm generating some energy now on some of the 5 gigahertz ranges. I'm going to also generate a really narrow band signal. So you can see this is actually a 20 megahertz wide signal here. But I'm going to also generate a really narrow signal, because that's one of the challenging things when it comes to spectrum analysis, and just kind of show the capabilities, is how we can not only see these wideband interferers really easily and quickly, and identify those are kind of easy, but we can also see that there's this really narrow band interfering source over here. So just to show the detail that we're able to get down into when it comes to these interfering devices. So this is just generating a really narrow signal there. That could be, also, we could turn that into like a frequency hopper, but I just want to show just a static narrow frequency and how that would show up on the spectrum, just showing the level of detail. Let's zoom in on this guy here on channel 56, and you can see those individual subcarriers, the center frequency very clearly. So just going from like a standard definition, very pixely view to very high resolution. And let's change that back from point density now to the more traditional max density that you're probably used to seeing if you've done any kind of spectrum analysis. We can also look at things from like a average sweep. Let's actually turn off the density view altogether, and now you can see the more detail of the actual sweeps here that are happening. We can change the duration of this as well, so I can lower this all the way down to, let's say, like 1 second, and now we can see over a 1 second period of time how that's changing. So that can be really helpful in identifying the interfering devices, interfering sources in the environment. And obviously we've got some actual Wi-Fi activity here at the end of the band, so we can narrow, drill down into that if we actually want to see the Wi-Fi channels being used. Let's go ahead and do one more kind of test here. I'm going to go ahead and generate some Wi-Fi energy on channel 157. I've got a computer that's connected. I'm going to go ahead and run a speed test, and we'll see what that does to the spectrum here. Let's actually look at the channel information. You can see here's the channels, and let's look at, yeah, there we go. So we can see that speed test starting now. If we look at the waterfall view, you can see the density there. We can even zoom in further on that to see that activity. let's go back to our point density. You can see that, max density. And let's go to our real-time sweep so we can actually see how rapidly that those sweeps are actually occurring. About 20 sweeps per second across both the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz bands. And yeah, those internal radios at the same time are providing a bunch of other information about the access points and the the radios that are audible in the environment here, both the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz bands. Take a look at the questions here and see if there's any specific questions on that. Brian, have you seen any questions come in regarding any of that information?
Nothing specifically about that, but I've had questions about the potential emulation from the device. And Sidekick doesn't emulate clients, it's just receiving. So if you want to emulate your clients, I like using a little 5 gigahertz nano USB adapter. Let's see, here's another question. See, it looks good, but in a cluttered room, I'm not sure if it's better than adapters being able to hold the laptop adapters out or over obstructions, specifically so I can get wall-to-wall readings, etc. But if you need to hold the adapters out, you're also holding out your laptop or your notebook, and if you're wearing the Sidekick, you can certainly just reach and hold it out if you need to as well. If you think you need to get over an obstruction, that is very doable.
Yeah, I think that's a good good topic. Just kind of change your mindset and focus a little bit from what you're used to maybe doing. But I think I know exactly what you're talking about there as far as taking those kind of measurements, because there's been plenty of times where I've had to kind of dangle my laptop with the adapters attached to the lid of it over some kind of overhang or something like that to try and get a proper reading of what it is, and it's kind of a scary thing, right? Because you're dangling this laptop over the edge of something. That's actually one of the benefits I feel of the Sidekick, is because of the Sidekick being somewhat detached from your laptop and having this cable. I actually use like a 6-foot cable on my Sidekick, and I wrap it around the Sidekick to tie up the loose amount of cable. But the reason why I like using a longer cable is for those kind of purposes, where if I need to hang the Sidekick on something or set the Sidekick on a table and step through a doorway or something like that to be able to take those readings on both sides of something, by having that kind of detached in that way is kind of beneficial, I feel. I've also just recently was doing some field testing with this in a warehouse, and we had to squeeze through some pretty narrow spaces, and it was really nice to have a Surface Pro tablet with a Sidekick and that really slim profile that you get from that to be able to squeeze through tight spaces and not have to worry about banging your adapters on something and snapping it off, as you're trying to squeeze through in between some product and things like that on, in a shelving area. And that was always a worry and a concern, with the traditional adapter-based setup, with everything kind of sticking off and these antennas and everything to get snagged on things.
Now, I know I've broken the adapters before.
Yeah.
I'm a big oaf. So.
Well, and that's the other benefit I feel like of the Sidekick is the ruggedizedness, right? So being this purpose-built device for surveying, it's built with that intention that it's going to get banged around and it's going to need to survive these kind of environments that it's going to be used in, from warehouse and manufacturing to a healthcare environment. But yeah, it's expected that it's going to get kind of knocked around in these things and not having to worry about that USB connection, right on the adapter itself.
Is there anything else you need to show here, Jerry?
No, you want to go ahead and take control and finish sharing your screen?
Yeah, we'll finish up the discussion very quickly, and then we'll get to some good questions.
Sounds good.
Okay, so the next steps would be obviously to contact us and request demonstrations from either Jerry, who just showed us a great presentation on the spectrum analysis piece of Sidekick, or from Nick Turner, who handles EMEA for us. Those are free of charge, and we can show you anything you like inside the tool, how to use it. So that is a great way to go. You can also request an evaluation license for Ekahau Site Survey, ekahau.com/evaluation. And you can also go ahead and buy a Sidekick. You can go to ekahau.com how to buy and order from our online store or through distribution channels. We also have training, online training with dozens of hours of videos, how-tos, best practices, and obviously webinars. But we also have a 4-day expert level class taught by CWNEs on how to use Ekahau and some deep RF design theory as well. So now we're going to go back to some Q&A stuff. We've had some good questions coming in. Let me get to one that we have not answered yet here. Let's see.
There was a couple of questions, Brian, around the adapters, and I know you started to kind of answer this, but I wanted to add a little bit more. So, yeah, just to kind of clear the air there as far as the adapters. I mean, the adapters in the Sidekick are not intended to emulate, the worst case client, right? And the reason for that is we want adapters in our survey device that are going to be more sensitive than these worst case devices, these single stream mobile phones and things like that. And then on the back end, we want to be able to compensate for that. So we want to be able to say, we want to be able to decode these frames at very long ranges, these beacons at very long ranges because of, the energy that they're still created, even if those devices may not have as good of receive sensitivity and may not be able to decode those beacons, that energy still is there that we need to be concerned with from a co-channel interference standpoint, as well as other devices that may have those kind of capabilities. So we need to be able to have a device that can be at least as sensitive as our most capable devices, but then on the back end be able to compensate for these less capable devices. And that's one of the things that this device allows you to do is have the same radio grade, the quality grade of the radio and receive sensitivity of the radios in here as like an access point would, the radios inside of an access point. But then on the software side, we can compensate for that and say, okay, now if this is a 6 dB less signal or less receive sensitivity, we can compensate for that in the software.
Now, also, if you want to get some emulated live action, you can use a nano USB card that's only 5 gigahertz, and they have very small, low-powered radios with very small antenna in them, and that will help you simulate your least capable but most important devices like phones and maybe some barcode scanners and things like that, and you can use that in conjunction with Sidekick, but Sidekick will be doing all the listening, and you can use that little nano USB for throughput testing or pings.
Yeah, so there's the active survey and the passive survey. So from a passive survey standpoint, exactly, you want to have this more sensitive, high receive sensitivity device to be able to decode these beacons at long ranges, so you can know, what these neighboring devices are and things like that that might be overlapping with your network, and be able to decode those. Even though you're very potentially far away from them and they're affecting your network. But yeah, to Brian's point, the active survey, that's where you want to emulate that client, right? So we want to know, how is this client performing and behaving on the network? Are they experiencing packet loss? Are they getting disconnected? And that's where we allow you to use any external adapter, that has maybe similar radio properties to, let's say, like a single spatial stream phone, mobile device. You can get these very small, cheap adapters, and those will work for an active survey.
Yeah, following along with some of the questions about adapters, Bill is asking, does this replace the Proxim cards? Well, that's the goal, is to get rid of the external dongle cards and use one wearable device. But you could still use the Proxim or any other, like Jerry just said, any other external card as your active or an additional passive adapter. And another question, any licenses to purchase or just a hardware purchase? Well, you obviously have to be running ESS, so you have to have that license, and then it's just a hardware purchase for Sidekick to have it report back to ESS. That hasn't changed.
Yeah, so Glenn had a good question of, as far as the licensing goes and tying it to your MAC address. Thanks for being on, Glenn. Good to see you on. But yeah, the licensing model doesn't change from, if you're used to using the adapters, licensing model stays the same regarding Sidekick. So the license can either be tied to your machine, to a specific machine, or it can be tied to the Sidekick. Obviously, the advantage of tying it to the Sidekick is it's external and it's transferable physically, so you can transfer that to, let's say you have a desktop computer and a laptop or a tablet. You can use that same license between the two machines, whichever one you have the Sidekick plugged into at that time.
And if you already have your licensing tied to one of the external survey adapters and you want to purchase Sidekick, support can help you move that license from being tied to the external card to the Sidekick. And then you would just proceed like you normally did, except you'd be using the Sidekick as your survey adapter. That's the same type thing. Another question from Bill: does this have a database of interference that will tell you what the interference is like Spectrum XT does? Well, you must be a soothsayer or something, Bill. That's coming, but it's not in the product today. That's something we are working on. We've had a lot of requests for that in the past, but it's not in the product today. So you would have to kind of know the signatures of those things yourself for now, or be closer to it. And you can find it. The closer you get, the stronger the signal is going to be, obviously. But that is something we're working on.
Yeah, and to add to that, as far as, what does the Sidekick provide today in the integrated spectrum analysis? Well, the higher resolution and the faster sweeps is going to be helpful for things like being able to identify the interfering source. How that works is, let's say you're performing a survey. Typically when you're performing a survey, you're physically moving through the building fairly quickly, right? You're at a pretty steady or fast walking pace. Especially using multiple adapters enables you to be able to move faster. So we need a spectrum analysis capability that can keep up with that, for the sake of, if there's an interfering device as you walk past a room, we need to be able to map that out, right, from the standpoint of seeing the signal strength. When you walk past that door, or when you walk inside that room, we saw a big spike. Once there's no barrier between you and that interfering source, we should be able to easily tell that interfering source spiked when you went inside that room. So it's going to be really helpful to be able to identify, two things. One, where are these interfering sources located physically in the building, and how far-reaching are they? And then two, how impactful are they? So from a channel utilization standpoint, we're going to map that out as well, and it'll allow you to have heat maps that are going to see that channel utilization in a heat map view.
Let's see. So we may have a couple others that have come in here. Any throughput indicators? Again, Mike, that's a good question, but the throughput would be using either the internal adapter in your tablet or laptop, or using an external adapter for that, like the little nano USB cards or something, because the Sidekick is not set up to perform throughput. It's not going to act as a client, so that would not happen yet. Are the radios upgradable in the future? That I don't know. I'm going to assume that they're soldered in, because I've not cracked mine apart.
They are actually modular, so there is they were built for the capability of that. Obviously it's early to tell of, where the future is going to go. But yeah, future-proofing these was definitely something, in mind, especially being that these are purpose-built for Wi-Fi surveying. So you got to imagine, from an engineering standpoint, that's definitely something that, we at Ekahau took, into careful consideration there, to make sure that these could be modular in that sense, and be able to, drop in, let's say, an 802.11ax radio if the need arises for that. Today, from what I understand of 802.11ax, not to open up a can of worms there, but this has been kind of a hot topic, I know. So my understanding of 802.11ax, and I haven't played with it myself, so I can't tell you for sure, done any testing myself, but there should be backwards compatibility between AX and all the previous technologies, which means even if you're surveying with an 802.11ac radio, there's no reason to upgrade it to an 11ax for survey purposes, because it will still be able to decode those frames.
Yeah, that was always the case, like when 802.11g came out, and when B came out, and N and AC itself. That was always the case with backwards compatibility. So you're able to hear it, you just wouldn't be able to decode everything that it does normally.
Yeah.
What do we have here? Can Sidekick itself be used just for viewing interference as a standalone tool? That's from Peter. Peter, you would still need ESS to visualize what Sidekick sees. So there's not a way to just plug it into any laptop or device and have it work separately. There's no display on it either, so you would still need ESS to visualize what it hears. Let's see what else we got here. Would this enable you to see radar signals, given they may be periodic pulses or may not actually be real radar? Another good question. Yes, if it's in the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz frequencies, we would be able to see that. And since it's not a continuous thing, as the radar sweeps, you may have to stand in the location long enough to have it sweep back around and hit you, so you'll know that it's there, and maybe stand there for a bit to start understanding the pattern of how the radar is sweeping. That's just standard. That should be the same as anything else.
And actually, on that note, Peter, yeah, there's a few other additional things that the Sidekick will hopefully in the future be able to provide regarding that radar detection with the Wi-Fi radios, also supporting that radar detection within a single device. We could analyze that, and you know, this is kind of, you know, down the road a bit, but yeah, there is definitely something that's being looked into of correlating that information together for false positives of if the Wi-Fi radio detects a DFS event or radar event, can we confirm that with the spectrum analyzer kind of a thing. So there's definitely some interesting use cases when it comes to that, and having a spectrum analyzer and these enterprise Wi-Fi chipsets in the same enclosure.
Yeah, Kid Johnson is asking, can the battery be replaced? I'm sure it can if it goes bad, but it's not something where you would carry a couple spare batteries in your backpack and swap out at this point.
Yeah, it's not a user accessible thing, so it's something that you'd have to send in for.
Yeah, the battery itself, the charge, I've used it for over 8 hours myself, so I know that it'll last for a full day's work. And assuming you take a lunch break in that eight hours, you could charge it up during the or have it on charge during your lunch break. So it'll give you a little more time, but it's certainly a lot longer time than you would have had before with the dongles either way. So here's a question here from Pasquale. Maybe this was asked, how long does the battery life last? 8 hours. And is it chargeable via USB? It's a standard USB plug-in to charge with a separate cord and a little
not
AC.
Not USB, it's a DC barrel connector. So yeah, it's not chargeable over USB. And yeah, that's something that was actually looked into because of the problem with charging over USB is it's slow, right? And this is a pretty big battery in here, very high power to last that long. So yeah, the decision was made to have it more of a fast charge than a slow, more compatible charge. So the nice part about the charging is, though, even though it does use a barrel connector and more of a high power charger, over 2 hours it'll charge back up to 75%. So you figure, yeah, if you take a break for an hour for lunch, you'll get a couple more hours of surveying out of it, just charging it up over lunch.
And it's also a standard connector, so having traveled with gear before and knowing how it gets placed in the wrong tote or the wrong pack and shipped somewhere by mistake, you could run out to a local store and buy another adapter and charge if you had to. It's just a standard end on there. This is more of a feature request. In the future, more than one USB port to use USB drive to plug in. Now, I don't know what you would plug into that. Maybe if you have a tablet with just a single USB in, and it's maybe a USB port on Sidekick for another adapter in the future, maybe. But that if there's enough demand for that, we'll look into it, I'm sure.
Yeah, Sebastian, I'd be curious to see more or hear more of what your thoughts are behind that, of what the use case would be. The Sidekick is essentially a full-blown computer in there with its own storage and everything on board, and that's how it's able to do all the heavy lifting in the Sidekick and then parse out the data to ESS and take all that heavy lifting off of your computer to increase that battery and performance and everything of your survey device. But yeah, I'd be curious from that USB port, what you'd be looking to connect to it. Not sure the gigabytes off the top of my head. You know, it's meant to just hold that data as more of a cache than anything, and also from like a a redundancy kind of thing, so that way no data is lost, you know, during the survey as part of that. But yeah, there's no. I'm not sure what the actual gigabyte storage is.
Another question, this is from Glenn, does Sidekick have a type of RF spectrum signature identifier similar to MetaGeek Channelizer? We've answered that already. It's something we're working on. It's just not in the product yet. So that is coming. Kind of like the old $3,500 Cognio PCMCIA cards. So that's coming. All batteries die after extended use. So that's a comment here from Kit. They do, because they're man-made products. So if the battery does go bad inside the Sidekick, that would be something that we would have to replace. So it'd be something you'd ship it back to us. We would have somebody replace it and send it back to you. Let's see. Will there be any adapter available to charge from mobile sources? Well, the brick that's on the charging cable now has a standard connector, like you connect a desktop or a monitor with. So if you had something that was already developed for that, I'm sure that it would work. Or you could get a power converter, and if you want to pull it off of the cigarette adapter in a car into the converter, and you can get those converters for maybe $50 or $75, and it's just a regular 3-prong plug on the other end to plug into. So the technology's there. It's just not part of our kit yet. What else do we have here? What else we got here? I scroll down.
I think we pretty well got through all of them, and yeah, it looks like we're right on time here, so probably a good time to cut everybody loose. And Letisa, are you still on the line? You want to get anything to cover?
No, I'm still here, and thank you guys so much. Very insightful. And thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. So if you do have any other questions, something that comes up that you weren't able to think of at the moment, please feel free to contact either Bryan or Jerry directly. Their contact information is on the screen. We'll also send a follow-up email within the next 24 to 48 hours with a link to a recording of today's webinar. So on behalf of Ekahau, we thank you for joining, and have a great rest of your day.
So we've got one last one that popped in. Sebastian's asking if anyone from Ekahau is going to be at WLPC in Europe. I'm pretty sure we'll have someone there. I just don't know who.
Yeah, Miko, UC, and I believe Nick Turner, all from Ekahau, will be there. So I think there'll be at least three people from Ekahau there with sidekicks to check out. So yeah, if you haven't seen one yet and you're going to be going to WLPC in the EU here in coming weeks, yeah, definitely find one of those guys. I think Miko is actually going to be presenting there, so you should see it in action there.
Now, I'll throw this out like every week. This is not a wedding, speak now or forever hold your peace. On the left-hand side here, we have both Jerry and my contact information. You can send us emails or send us a message on Twitter if you like, if you have questions you think of after the session.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.